Take a trip with us to Nilbog. Just promise not to drink the goo.
Oh my God!
If you get sucked into the Matrix, we will send the phone for you.
Do you believe in fate?
But every movie has a plot hole, and every hole gets filled somehow. Whiskey, wine, or blue milk. Just don't cut me off right now. We're the Plotaholics, a breakfast club of two. We're the Plotaholics, ripping plots apart for you.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Hey. Oh, I just got a little echo of myself off there. But at any rate, hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Plotaholics podcast. I am Shane Wilson, and that over there is a holly jolly Brian's hand.
Oh, sweet Christmas. Or should I?
You are
Yeah, I'm wearing
now that we're into it.
Yeah, I'm wearing my Luke Cage Sweet Christmas sweatshirt.
Excellent. Yeah, you don't sound good.
I don't?
No, you are cracking up all over the place.
Holy crap. Okay. Hold on a second. I know how to
Are you on like a
fix this thing. No, I got this. Give me 2 seconds.
Okay. All right. Well, in the name of keeping things rolling here so that we don't ever have to do any post, production or editing or anything. This week, obviously, if you are clicking on, then you know that we are talking about the original Avatar film, not to be confused with Avatar: The Last Airbender. Also not to be confused with Avatar: The Way of Water, the brand new film. Of course, it would make a lot more sense for us to try to, do that movie instead of this one. But we needed to do this one before we could do that one. And I don't know if we'll ever do that one. I don't know. It's hard to say.
I'll tell you what, the biggest issue, though, that I have to admit when it comes to seeing Avatar: The Way of Water is that I have not had time to go to the freaking cinema for that crap. I really have not. There's been a lot going on, man. Who literally has that much time?
Well, a bunch of people, but as it would have it, a bunch of overseas people.
Yeah, $900 million overseas?
No, it's not even $900 million total. It might be now, but
gotcha. Oh, you know what though?
You are still breaking up.
How am I still breaking up?
I don't know, man. It sounds like garbage time.
Okay, hold on. How about now? Does that sound better?
That's better.
Okay, holy crap. All right, no problem. There. How's that? Is that better?
Yes.
Does that work? Is that working? All right, cool. All right, I had to close this thing up.
Yeah, that'll do it. But also now your audio in your mouth doesn't sync up, but it's fine. Who really watches us anyway? You might be okay now. Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay.
Now. Yep.
Okay, cool. It had to write itself.
Okay. Of this 2009 Avatar.
Oh, all right. And I will accept full responsibility because this was my suggestion, trying to be topical with things. Fern Gully 2 takes us into the distant future, but not distant enough, where Jake Sully of the Jarhead clan is miserable due to suffering a paraplegic injury. So, since his twin brother got killed, he's dragged 6 years into space to put his brain in a mannequin. And then he decides, I want to be a mannequin now. And him and Ike from Tombstone decide that they have a quarrel. And for whatever reason, Giovanni Ribisi is there. Wow, I am not on my game today. All right. You know what? I have to admit, rewatching this movie last night because my mom Sharon, Miss Odette, and I, we sat up on the Tan family couch, put the Blu-ray on in,
Mm-hmm.
had it playing in the new PlayStation 5 that Sharon decided to spoil me with because apparently I deserve it. And I watched this movie, and I had to ask myself a question: why in the hell is this movie the top grossing film of all time? I don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
It looks pretty, but if that's the case, then why is there a paint by numbers the movie or Van Gogh the early years?
So here is sort of my central beef with that take.
Mm-hmm.
Every top grossing flick is a paint by numbers movie.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, yes.
I mean, like you've got Avengers Endgame, which is paint by numbers. There's just like a whole bunch of tiny little squares.
I mean, well, Avengers Endgame, the only reason why I will defend Avengers Endgame
Is because you love it.
Not even just because I loved it, but because of the fact that this was among the first times that we saw a film of that magnitude where the villain actually won in the previous movie. And we were like literally left on a freaking now what? We didn't see anything like that before, at least in the comic.
But you're talking about a movie that was split into two parts, and by all accounts,
it's two different. Well, it wasn't split into two different parts. It's two different stories. It's two different stories. The first movie is Thanos' movie, and the second one is the in Endgame is the answer to that.
And that's a very fair point. But I would also argue that Endgame is the more paint by numbers movie, and Infinity War is the better movie.
I'm all for calling Infinity War a better movie. I think what makes Endgame so great is that it picks up where the previous left off because we're dealing with the consequences. And then all of a sudden, I'm the smartest guy in the world. I can discover time travel in a night. And then it became a paint by numbers. So I get what you're saying, and I'm not totally disagreeing with you, but it at least did its best to be different.
Endgame
did its best to be different.
Endgame was better because it picked up where the previous left off.
No, I wasn't saying that Endgame is better. I'm agreeing with you that Infinity War is the better film.
Okay, well, Endgame.
But
give me your defense one more time.
All right, so basically what I'm saying with Endgame is that what makes it different than the other top grossing films of all time that, we agree are paint by numbers is that it at least tried to be different for at least a quarter to a half of the movie where it still continued on the strength of the better movie before it.
So essentially your defense of it is that it's a sequel.
Well, I mean, hey, Godfather 2 is pretty fucking awesome.
That's what you're saying. No, what makes it different is that it continues on the story from the first. Like that's a sequel.
No, it does. No, not just the story itself. It continues the theme.
Oh, it benefits from the strength of the.
It benefits from it because it continues with that narrative. Thanos won, and we felt it for that first half, and we saw the aftermath of that victory. But once we got to the whole Tony Stark can invent time travel in a night, that's when it became MCU paint by numbers.
Mm-hmm.
That's my defense. Infinity War, clearly hands, feet, shoulders, and toes ahead as a better film. Honestly,
I quibble with any criticism of Avatar that begins with "it's not an original story."
Well, I mean, I get it. Well, we're living in a time now where it's been 120 years since we've had this thing called cinema. It's impossible to have anything that's original anymore.
Well, I mean, I don't know that that's entirely true. I mean, of course, like you have sort of like basic like narrative archetypes that, good versus evil, rags to riches. Like there are basic story patterns that will always like come through, right?
Yeah, but
But
I mean,
I've never seen anyone else take a story about colonization of an indigenous people's planet or land and ream it out the way that they do Avatar. And they're all the exact same story.
that's
Now,
what I'm saying.
the problem, I think, now this movie is not without problems.
Mhm.
The biggest, most glaring one is white savior stuff. And like, I have a lot of questions about like the implications of him just becoming one of these people in the third act. But like, these are never the criticisms that you get when people like complain about Avatar. It's always like, well, that's just like Dances with Wolves with blue people. And it's like, so is every other story about like colonizers and native people. Like, they're all the same story because
Right.
like because every superhero story is the same story, and every origin story is a Jesus story, and every, you know what I mean, like, they're all the same. So what is your real beef with this movie?
Honestly, the fact that I've referred to Avatar as Fern Gully in space since it came out. Once
Right.
I discovered what it was about, and that's essentially my biggest beef with it.
Your
Not to
biggest beef with it is that it's just another retelling of
It's
a,
another retelling of a
and so
story.
what is your beef with Fern Gully? Is your beef with Fern Gully that it's Dances with Wolves and Trees?
Honestly, only reason I'll tell you the truth, I have not watched Fern Gully since it first came on cable. And I think my biggest issue, because honestly, I'm not even gonna lie to you, I never watched Dances with Wolves because when it came out, it wasn't in my wheelhouse, and I
Yeah.
just haven't had the desire to explore it.
Or Last of the Mohicans in Trees, or I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I
it,
mean,
it's all the same shit. Like,
I think the one thing I like about the idea of Fern Gully is that it's a animated film, so it's showing children about colonization and how it's
okay.
not okay. So that's why I'll defend Fern Gully.
Uh-huh.
However, with
Very fun watching
Avatar,
you do gymnastics today.
oh yeah, you're making me work way too hard post trying to make myself, Christmas Brian.
Yeah.
But I'll tell but the thing is, Fern Gully animated Dances with Wolves and Trees, absolutely.
The
So
Last
then
of
when
the
you get
Mohicans.
when and Last of
Or
the
Last of
Mohicans.
I mean, we can.
What did I say?
Well, I said both. I said both.
Okay, cool. All right. I was making sure I didn't say anything completely
Yeah, I
different
was
like
trying to
Gremlins
find a
2.
touchstone that you were more familiar with, because
Okay.
like,
But
they're all, I mean, like, any group of indigenous peoples taking a last stand against a white oppressor is this movie. Absolutely. I will absolutely grant you that. But so is
mhm,
every other movie like that. So
right. But I kind of
the
feel
Mohicans
like
is beloved, right? Fern Gully is beloved. Like, why does this movie get shit on just because it's the same as a bunch of other movies that
you
do
know
the same thing?
you know why I think it is? The arrogance of James Cameron. I
Is
think
it,
that people
well, then why don't people shit on Terminator 2
because
or
I
Alien
think I'll tell you why.
or
This is
Titanic?
what this is well, for one, people have shit on Titanic.
Well, okay, now we're
People are still shitting on people are still shitting on the aspect of the door.
so right. So now we're sort of like circling the target a little bit closer, right? Because James
Yeah.
Cameron hate, I believe you're right, starts with Titanic. And I
Mhm.
again disagree. Titanic is a fucking masterpiece.
It's a good movie. I don't hate Titanic. Matter of fact, Titanic instilled a lot of when I watch certain movies that are considered
Yeah.
epics, okay, which
Mhm.
we can put Titanic in that boat. An epic had better make me feel all the feels in its runtime in
Mhm.
sufficient time. I better be able to laugh. I better be on the edge of my seat. I better hate somebody, and I better love somebody. I want to
Yeah.
feel all the feels.
Yes. And I
Titanic
hated
does that.
Rose and I loved Billy Zane.
Billy Zane, as much as I hate his character, I have time for Billy Zane in anything he does because he's
Yeah.
Billy effing Zane.
I think Titanic is a great film.
I
And
agree.
and
Well, I
and
think and I
maybe
think
that,
Titanic is when people started hating James Cameron because before James Cameron was the guy that did Terminator and he put a shot in the arm of the Alien franchise. But then once we got to Titanic, this is when he, at least in my opinion, became one of those pretentious filmmaker types.
so now I don't really listen to James Cameron talk. All right.
Mm-hmm.
I
It's
don't
probably best that
know
we
that
don't.
I have ever heard him say anything or read a quote of his ever in my life. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like but I don't seek out the creators of this stuff. Like, you know
Neither
what I
do
mean?
I. I try not to as well.
And
It's
so if I divorce his like arrogance, which I've personally not seen, again, like I don't seek it out, so I don't see it. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Then what I see in the culmination of his efforts is like years long attempts at getting something right. Uh, and as a creator, I can appreciate that.
He's a perfectionist.
Right.
It's got to
And
be perfect, or it's not going to get done. And I think I'm developing a love hate for James Cameron.
I think a love hate is probably the right approach because we can definitely like if he said terrible things or if he's been snooty about whatever, like you can definitely take issue with that. But his attention to his craft is
On point.
James
It's
Cameron is
spot on.
not James Cameron is a filmmaker. He's not a script writer, right? Like I mean he writes
Correct.
scripts, but he's a filmmaker. And so you have
Yes.
to take in the entire experience when you watch a James Cameron film, right? Um, because it's experiential cinema. It's not just watching a movie, right?
Right.
Now, again, there are absolutely problems with Avatar, but all I ever hear when people complain about it is the Fern Gully thing and the unobtainium thing, right?
The
And
unobtainium thing is hard to deal with. It is, but
your audio's gone again.
all right. The thing is with the unobtainium, I feel like the reason why I like why he gave
It's still
the
cracking.
mineral.
There it is. There it is. Now we're back. Now we're back.
All right.
You're good
I
now.
get why he gave the mineral in question such a blasé name. I totally get it, at least from a writer and creator standpoint. It doesn't matter what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It
I'm
just
glad that you take this
is.
stance, right? Because like this is how first of all, this is how I sort of like justify it, right?
Mhm.
People found it and people named it, and people aren't good at
What they
naming
wanted
things.
to name it.
Right? Yeah,
No, they're
exactly.
not.
That's
They're going to
the
name
first-
it what they're going to name it.
And the second thing is, I haven't heard a single complaint about Black Adam's Eternium, and it's the same thing.
Right. Exactly. Or the litany of other made up stuff. Why aren't people mad at the word palladium?
Well, here's the other
Or
thing: is like Brian. Here's a spoiler alert: everything's made up.
everything is made up. All
Everything
words
is
are made up. That sounds
Right.
like a made up word. All words are made up.
All words are made up. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
So
you
if
can fuck off
you're one of the people
unobtainium.
that if you're one of the people that are listening in on this and they're like you're getting ready to say, "Huh, well, these are the same complaints about Avatar that I've heard everywhere else, especially that unobtainium thing." Well, guess what? I don't have an issue with it being called unobtainium.
Yeah, and I don't
Because
even have an issue with it being an indigenous people story recast with blue people, because I think that sometimes, well, okay, we've talked about this too when we talk about sci-fi and horror. Sometimes you have to backdoor your message, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can't just like, it's sci-fi, right? And so, in the fact that it's sci-fi, it is still tackling important issues. It's important. It's tackling issues about how we take care of or fail to take care of the physical and mental health of our veterans.
Yeah.
It is tackling issues of colonization, et cetera, et cetera. Now, it's a little like on the nose, sure, but it's still a sci-fi flick that's tackling
that's
these
what
things in
and
much
that's
the
what
same
sci-fi
way.
movies have been doing for forever.
Exactly, in much the same way that a Star Wars would, right? Or whatever franchise, right? So, yeah, I don't have an issue with that particular thing either, right? Now, now we can get into my beefs with it. Now,
All right, let's compare and contrast our beefs,
yeah,
because I came out swinging with my beef that was very very admittedly so very thin, but there are other issues that I have with it. It's just on the surface I'll call it Fern Gully in space, but I do have my other issues with it. Not to say that I hate this movie. I have complaints about this movie. I still would, just because I question why it's the top grossing film of all time doesn't mean I hate it. I just feel that there are other films that are better. Let me
So okay, well let's talk
say
about
that.
your first question, because I feel like I have something of an answer
Okay.
as
All
to
right.
why this is the top grossing film of
All right.
all.
Why? All right. Yeah, that's a good. Let's tackle that. Why is this the top grossing? The
The
top.
reason that this film is the top grossing film, at least one of the leading reasons why it's one of the top grossing films of all time, is that the 3D aspect of it was such an important part of its original marketing, and those tickets cost twice as much at that time.
True. And
Uh,
this was probably the first film that really got 3D right.
yeah, absolutely. And it was something that you like in the marketing, like you have to see this in 3D. And couple
Yeah.
that with its intense, and I can't answer the question as to why, but its intense popularity overseas.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I don't think we can answer why certain films do better overseas than they do here. We can't because we don't live there. We don't know the culture.
I mean, it
So
probably doesn't hurt that the American military is the bad guy.
very true. Very true. Very
So
true. And I definitely I want to piggyback with you on the concept of the 3D aspect.
yeah,
I remember now, as we both wear glasses as kids, it was difficult to partake in 3D because, well, if you can't see without your glasses, it don't matter
you're
what it
wearing like
does.
2 pairs of glasses.
And 3D glasses, my glasses, I remember getting the 3D glasses for the Nightmare on Elm Street box set, so I could watch Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy's Dead in 3D.
Mhm.
And I got a migraine that lasted for at least a day and a half.
Yeah,
And and after that, I was done with 3D, period. And I think the first movie I ever saw in 3D was, I think it was Force Awakens. And that was completely by accident. And
right.
I
You got
thought,
the wrong ticket.
yeah, well, because I just bought the ticket, not realizing I wasn't paying attention. And they gave me the glasses, and I was like thinking I was going to have to go ask for my money back, but I decided to sit for a minute. I put the 3D glasses on over mine, and the experience was beautiful.
Yeah, and at that point, and in what when the Force Awakens came out, we were several years removed from this. And this film, I believe, I saw in 3D
Hmm.
initially, but yeah, I just remember that being a huge point in the marketing campaign, that like this was one that you really needed to see in 3D. And I have to believe that that inflated ticket prices, because at that point, like even though like general admission tickets are more expensive today, they still aren't as expensive as 3D tickets were in 2009.
Correct. Very correct.
And
And
3D tickets now are basically the same price as general
right.
admission tickets.
Yeah, they're only like a dollar
Right.
more, if
So,
even that. And
so it's
that's to
sort of
cover
the
that's
cost of
to
the glass.
cover of the glasses, yeah, which they recycle anyway.
Yeah. So that to me is probably one of the biggest culprits of like this movie's initial success.
Okay, I agree with that. And I'll take it another step. Not just the 3D marketing, but the vibrant colors. Colors draw people in. It's like colors are like bring people like moths to a flame. So when you see something that's done in a color palette that looks like avatars,
I mean,
it's going to bring people to look at it, to watch it, just out of curiosity.
the movie is, and this is not something that we're here to quibble with. I don't think the movie is beautiful.
It is a very beautiful. It's beautifully shot. It's beautifully done.
And it's
Oh,
beautifully imagined, even if it's
yes, it is.
imagined as like an indigenous people's colonizer tale. Like the world that is created here on Pandora is a beautiful world.
It is. Even when they try to make it out to be the most hostile environment known to man, well,
Yeah.
it's because you're not from there. So obviously, it's going to be hostile.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, and but in its beauty, it's also something that we can relate to,
Yeah.
because some of these things could be a force here, with obvious exceptions. But yeah, it's a gorgeous film. The colors are amazing. And I even remember, I was saying this last night, for some of the issues that I may have with this is a beautiful looking movie.
Yeah, it is. It is a beautiful looking movie, and that's why it takes him so long to make these things, because he wants to make sure that they look the way that he sees them in his brain, right? At least that's what I think.
That's the way I see it too.
And I don't have any problem with that, because that's the way that I want my books to look when they come out. Like, I will quibble with the publisher over font styles and things for like weeks at a time, because I want it to look the way that I want it to look.
Yeah. This is one of the things that separates James Cameron from a U-Bowl.
Yeah, well, and this is why, like, when it's all said and done, and his filmography isn't as long as that of like the Russo brothers or whatever, right? Like,
because the Russos are doing a new movie every other week.
Yeah, but that's
he's
why
taking
his
time.
filmography, when it's all said and done, will you could hold his filmography up against almost anybody's, and he would at least be in the conversation, right?
Absolutely. I do not
craftsman.
I do not disagree with you there. Not to mention the fact that, at least among some of the heavyweights of cinema, James Cameron has such an amazing reputation. I mean, like, Sigourney Weaver's reputation is, we don't even need to discuss it, because we know how important she is to cinema, and her reputation is very sound. She keeps coming back to work with the man.
Yeah.
She has never had a bad thing to say about him. Linda Hamilton, same thing. Linda Hamilton is not maybe on the same tier as far as fame as Sigourney Weaver. And I think that's more her choice. She's chosen to take steps back at times. But still, her word carries a lot of weight. Nothing but positive things to say about her. I'm sorry, Zoe Saldana, she, at this point, she don't have to do anything she don't want to do.
Right.
And she's come back for this.
Well, and this is what I'll say, like, the man has conviction about this story, because he's been working on this story for a decade and a half or longer, and continues to work on it, right? Like, so I believe when we talk about, like, you know, like first chapters in serials, like if Avatar 2009 were to be the last and only film made in this series, then we could judge it as harshly as we wanted to. But as we said when Infinity War came out, we can't fully judge this movie until the next one is out.
Correct.
And I would say that he has such a clear vision for this story, or he would have abandoned it, or he would have taken other smaller projects along the way. But this is its sole focus for 2 decades. And so I'm willing to take the ride. You know what I mean? That's sort of like, let's just see where he's going. Now, here's where I think things start to get a little bit muddled. Yeah. The Avatar program was the program through which these guys would pilot these like bio machine like suits, right?
Yes, they're created from the DNA of the human, mixed with the DNA of the Na'vi.
Right. Now, by all accounts, the Avatar program is over at the end of the first film.
Correct.
So why is this thing called Avatar?
You know what? I think because from what I've done some reading is that they've reestablished it. I think that it's gone from being for a scientific purpose to a militaristic purpose.
That makes sense.
So that's why we're still calling it Avatar.
I really, and I don't like that the franchise is basically taking its name from a program from the villains.
Right.
Because by all accounts, like, we are pulling for the Na'vi.
Yeah, we root for the Na'vi. The Na'vi are the good guys.
Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, and this is sort of the big thing, like, I don't like that this guy essentially does blueface, right? Like that's what the whole thing is, right?
Yeah, basically what it is, the only reason why Jake Sully is there,
their entire culture.
Yeah, he basically goes in looking just like, but the thing is that they know what he is. They even say, I can smell the alien of him. Like, they know what he is. They even refer to him as a demon.
Yeah.
At one point. So they know what he is. And
and I think, like, wouldn't it have just been like a little more effective if she had just fallen in love with a human boy?
I don't think
he could have just been himself the whole time, because at the end of it we see humans fighting alongside them.
Yeah.
Like when they're leading the guys off the planet, you know?
Yeah, but there's no way he's going to be able to take his wheelchair into the forest, Shane.
Well, okay. Now therein lies my next question. Why did he have to be in a wheelchair?
Because he couldn't afford to get his spine fixed.
I mean, I understand the story part of it.
Yeah, you know the story. You get the story aspect.
And I know that they needed him to be like discharged or whatever, so that he wasn't like actively on the battlefield or whatever, right? But like, if his brother died, then just call in the other brother. Like, he doesn't have to be hurt. Like, it doesn't change the fact that you've got this suit that costs millions of dollars to make and nobody to pilot it. Like, he doesn't have to have no use of his legs, right?
No, you're right. I don't disagree.
Character more motivation to like betray the scientists, right?
Yeah.
Which brings me to my next question. Why even have the brother die to begin with? Like, why not just have that be the guy that was meant to pilot it from the beginning? Like, it's a bunch of unnecessary steps to get to the same conclusion.
Yeah. But I think the problem is, though, is that Tommy wasn't a warrior. And the Navi said, and a lot of the names escape me of the characters. Like, I know Natiya. That's it. I can't remember.
Your audio is cracking again.
Again, son of a bitch. So when they were talking about it, when Jake first goes to the Navi, and they say that we've tried to educate the Sky people, but you can't fill a full cup. Meaning that when they tried to talk to the scientists just didn't get it. So I think Jake
knew too much, right?
Yeah, the scientists felt like they knew everything already.
You're still cracking up, man. Like, what is going on with your shit today?
I don't know. I have everything set up like normal.
Well, I guess I might have Bluetooth.
No, this is it's plugged in. I don't know what the hell this is.
It's so weird. You sound like just a garbled mess.
Oh, this is horrible. This is horrible. All right. Let me see. What does this do? Now I'm just like moving things around. You still hear me now, or is it still like jump?
It's still jumbled.
Okay.
What all you got running on your machine over there?
Yeah, let me start shutting more things down here. Let me
yeah, clearly, like, I don't know why you got to try to run all that shit anyways.
Well, because at one point I was like, trying to bring home some bacon, but at the same token, I get it. All right. How's now? Is this better?
It's the same.
It's the same.
Oh, nope. Right. I think we got it now. We're good now. We're good.
We have it now? We have it?
Yep. You're back. You're back.
Okay. All right. So the fact of the matter is that since Tommy, the dead twin, was a scientist, there's no way he would have been able to accept the teachings of the Navi.
Okay.
They even said that since Jake is considered a grunt and he's looked at as not being intelligent, that he would do a lot better with learning the culture. And that's the only reason why they don't kill him initially, is because they just want to see if he can be educated in their ways, to see if there's hope. It's almost like if he's not able to be taught, then they're just going to kill any human being that comes there.
Right. And herein, I like this part, right? Because herein lies like an essential aspect of any indigenous story. It's like any colonization story, right? It's the idea that like the aggressors are the colonizers. And in almost every case, the indigenous peoples try to help them, only to eventually be snuffed out.
Yeah. And they realize that, well, we screwed up trying to be nice to these guys.
They are not hostile, right? Like, as
long as you leave them alone, as long as you're leaving them alone, they're fine.
We're talking about whenever the guy says, you throw a stick in this place and you'll hit some sacred tree. And, yeah, sure. Like they have a lot of like ritualistic sacred places, but I'm like, if somebody walked into your house and threw a stick, they would throw something they would hit something that you don't want them to take.
Right.
Like you're
Right.
in your house.
Right. You are on their planet. You're the guest. That's just like me coming to the Shane Wilson Michelle house, the Shane and Michelle house, and just sort of walking in, shoes on, ignoring the fact that they have a please take your shoes off policy.
We do not.
Which you don't. And then me just walking into y'all's bedroom and just throwing myself on your bed, shoes on.
Yeah.
Like, yep, here we go. Matter of fact, I'll take it one step further. This is seriously a fuck your couch situation. It's a fuck your couch mentality.
Yeah, it is. Like this guy that is, you know, like the unobtainium guy, right? Like that is like the rock.
Yeah, he's the company. He's
he
the guy that the company
moment to understand like that, like by tearing down that tree, he's tearing down like an apartment complex.
Right. He's tearing down like an important part of the ecosystem. But of course, and I'm sorry, man, Giovanni Ribisi, you want to talk about a guy who, as an actor, has always done an amazing job just playing these slimy creeps. Like, I don't know, man. Like, how hard is it? It must be so difficult as an actor to be able to be a horrible person. So, like, just like on the drop of a dime. Because every time he talks, every time he laughs in this movie, I just want to punch him in his face really hard.
Yeah, I would say like this film does. So, admittedly, the plot of the film is pretty standard, basic fare, right?
Yes.
But when you think like he has a vision for this film that is like at least 4 movies long, if not 5, right?
Yeah, he said that he's got a lot of movies in mind, and they're filming. I think they filmed the 3rd movie at the same time as the 2nd, so he's going the Lord of the Rings approach.
Yeah, but now when you look at this film does. If this film is not a standalone and it's a part of a bigger story, then it does exactly what it's supposed to do because it spends 2 hours world building. And so it still needs a plot. And so it gives us kind of a paint by numbers story just to help us establish like where we are and who we are and who everybody is. Right.
Yes.
And to that end, I have no real issues with it because again, it's a movie that we will only ever be able to fully judge once we've gotten to the end of the story. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
if
just
you
kind of
judge it
feel
as a standalone film, then it gets really high marks in production and vision and cinematography and score. James Horner is on his game again. The visual aspects of the film are beautiful. It gets lower marks in its story for sure, without question. But its third act is compelling. Like the battle is as compelling as any other battle. Like it's just the Death Star. It's just like the final chapter of Endgame. It's any other fight sequence that we've ever seen. You know?
Yeah, I can get by that. I really feel like with this
For one thing, I appreciate that the colonizers are able to take down Home Tree, because in many cases that would have been the final stand. And they would have found a way to save it, right?
Right.
And so I appreciate that Cameron gives them that loss, right? Because it's important in a story where you're completely outmanned and outgunned that you do suffer casualty in order for it to feel genuine, right?
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, because you even look at it when they're like, we've got all these tribes, 2,000 strong. And it's like, that's not really large. That's not really a lot. Now, granted, it's a lot for this planet because...
Well, it takes a lot of money and effort
to bring people out there.
Right? Yeah.
And it's going to take like 6 years to get reinforcements there.
Right, which is why it has taken 12 years to get the next installment, because those guys had to get home and they had to like get some new folks, and now they're headed back. And so now 12 years later, like they're like, we're ready to go, you know? And in the meantime, Pandora has suffered like the melting of its ice caps and everything's underwater. This is my headcanon.
Sounds about right. Sounds
but
about right.
but regardless, like the issues with the movie are that we couldn't see, like, my issues with the movie is that these two people couldn't, like, if these scientists were like real scientists, right? And they really
Mhm.
wanted to learn the culture of these people. That's anthropology, right? They would
Right.
go and embed themselves with them without assuming their form. And
Mhm.
they would like not, because that's manipulation, right? Like you're not being forward, right? Even if they can smell it out on you, if they know what you are, then why even wear the suit to begin with, right? And I
Right.
know that it's because it keeps you safe and it keeps like the wearer of it safe because they're at like this other undisclosed location or whatever. But like half of the time they're in some like mobile unit that could get picked up by a freaking pterodactyl or something. Uh, so I don't know how safe that really is. Anyway, but regardless, um,
Well, I think that
I just
well,
I would have really liked if, and I do like that at the very end that it's Neytiri that ends up saving Jake.
right.
That's
I did
sort of
appreciate
one,
that.
yeah, that's the one saving grace of it all because he comes back to save them. And ultimately, I'm not sure that he does much. He inspires them, maybe, which I didn't like. I didn't like the whole like Jesus scene where he was like walking through the whole crowd and they were all like, "Oh, he tamed the red one." Ooh.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
he got him and him and the Rabadactyl are friends now.
yeah, exactly. Like it was very like that was very like I didn't like that part, right?
I
Where he
seriously feel like that mother's milk could have gotten the big red pterodactyl. He just didn't want to.
right, exactly.
And the
But
reason
they
why, and I make reference to Laz, I think his name is Laz Alonso. He
mhm,
plays Mother's Milk on The Boys. He also played the guy that was supposed to have been marrying Natiri.
yeah,
And then, Jake Sully just decided, yeah, screw your Laz Alonso.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, Pocahontas, there's another one for you, right? Like,
yeah.
um,
But
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 yeah,
but I do like the fact that she is, because Natiri's a badass.
right.
She
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 saves
is a
him.
badass.
Ultimately, I feel like it's Awa that saves them all. It's not Jake. It is strange that Awa would choose Jake as her vessel, right?
It
But
is,
Awa
and
is the
that
one who delivers like those like hammerhead things. Awa is the
because he
one,
prayed to her.
right? And Awa is the one that like delivered all of this other stuff, right?
Yeah,
Um, and right, because he prayed to her, but ultimately like that reading of it depends on whether or not you think that his prayer was heard by Awa or if you think that Awa is defending herself,
I
because
think that Awa's defending herself.
right,
Honestly, I think
he
what it
I think
is.
uses Jake to inspire those folk, but
To,
Awa is like that's self-defense.
yeah, well, I think that Awa. I think the reason I think Awa stopped Natiri from killing Jake because Awa did notice that she saw something in him. And
Yeah,
to give credit to the Jake Sully character, he wasn't walking in here trying to be a white savior. That's not what he was. He wasn't like, I'm going to save these savages. At first,
I agree.
he was just doing a job
He
to
was
get
just
his
doing
legs
a
back,
job.
and then he started to.
It's the
He
power
actually
of owners.
it was the power of boners, but it was also, I think that he became very disenfranchised with the way life was on Earth, but he didn't know anything different. And now he sees something different, and he fell in love with, he even said, I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with this lifestyle. I fell in love with this.
Yeah.
And I think that, and you even start to see it in the characterization of Jake. And they even say it because I watched the 15-minute extra one because it tells more of Jake's
You're a
story
completionist.
because I am a completionist. Yeah, and you notice he's spending more and more time with the people than he is in his own body, to the
He's like
point.
not showering. Well, because he has the freedom, right?
Yeah,
And like and really if the technology exists for this man to have his legs back, then the US government should give him his legs back
I
because he
agree.
lost those on the job, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And
But I mean,
so like I
but
understand his being disenfranchised and everything, right? And like and wanting to go to the other thing, because I mean, okay, so here's the other side of the white savior thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is like we talked about white savior with like Electric Boogaloo, right? Because like the rich white people saved the community center. But in this case, Jake Sully is really no different from the Navi. He's been
He's
taken
been cast
advantage of.
out. He's been taken advantage of. He's been cast out. He's been ignored.
They've like mined this man for his raw natural resources, which is his ability to be a soldier. And once
Yep.
they had strip mined him of all of that and all of his usefulness, they were ready to cast him aside.
Yep. And then tried to entice him into genocide by saying, "We'll give you your legs back."
Right, exactly. Like we only need you as long as we need you, right?
Right.
And we only promise you to take care of you up until we don't need you anymore.
Exactly. So, and this is the one thing that I truly love about not just doing this show, but having these discussions with you, is because I will come into things with a hot take, and then we will sit and we'll talk about it. And not even just, but then as you're making a point about something else will kick in. And then we'll talk. And it was the same way with Rise of Skywalker. I tried so hard and I disillusioned myself to loving that movie. And then we came and we talked and we talked and we talked.
We talked a long time that day.
We talked for like over 2 hours that day.
Yeah.
And then I realized something. You realize I have not done a full-on Star Wars viewing since Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah.
Because if I watch the movies, I've got to watch Rise of Skywalker, and I really don't want to. I would rather just watch The Mandalorian and The Bad Batch.
Yeah.
And Ahsoka. And that's it.
Yeah.
I have no desire to go back there. So, but I mean, now, so here's another thing that I definitely want to discuss as far as, and I love that we're talking about this as far as with Jake Sully. Are we as the Plotaholics going as far to say that Jake is not so much a white savior, but he's really a cast off of human nature? So he's a victim of humanity.
I think that that's the way that we should read him. I think that the reason that he finds solace in the Na'vi people and the reason that he identifies with them is that he is like them. That like this is a class argument as opposed to a race argument, right? Like he is the warrior class, right, on Earth in the United States as a jarhead or as he's just seen as a cog in the machine, a replaceable part of the military,
right?
And he's just used for his raw materials until they're not there anymore, and then he's cast aside, and that's why he's wheelchair ridden. That's why he's ridiculed by his fellow soldiers, right?
He's ridiculed, and even by the scientists, because when he first gets there, Grace is treating him like crap. Norm is sort of looking at him like, oh, yeah, well, I guess I can be nice to you. Your brother did die. But then when he starts to excel, Norm is hot and jealous. And Grace is kind of like,
And I would argue that this film is about the grace and forgiveness of the Na'vi people as opposed to the abrasive, cold, industrial nature of the United States military.
I agree.
And the fact that he finds comfort in them and they are so willing to forgive him and accept him into their own as one of their own. That's what this story is about. And that to me is why the story is powerful. Like it is a paint by numbers story in a lot of ways, but once you arrive at that conclusion, like that it's clumsy maybe how we get to that conclusion, but that's still a powerful conclusion to get to. And herein lies, I think, where a lot of people could like to hate on James Cameron, because since Titanic, he's shown that he's more heart than like bravado, right? That he like Terminator 2 got him a bunch of fanboys because it's like robots shooting up people, you know? But like and aliens, right? But like when you get to Titanic and you get to Avatar, like you're seeing a filmmaker with a big heart, like trying to tell bigger stories.
And even in Terminator 2 and Aliens, you saw that
Those
heart
things are still
aspect.
there for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the abrasive nature of James Cameron is an artist, is a guy who is an actual artist, that he don't care about taking the time to tell his story of his art. And I can kind of understand why guys like, and not this is not in any way, shape, or form giving Martin Scorsese a pass, because this is a guy who made an entire career by making the same damn movie
Right.
over and over and over and over and over again
And
for
you would
40
be
plus
good
years.
too if you got to do the same thing that many times.
Right, exactly. James Cameron has
More
done,
like Coppola, right? Or
yes.
Kubrick, like those kind of, like he's in that conversation, right?
Yeah, and oh my God, Stanley Kubrick. You want to talk about a guy who to this day has hatred on him from one of the greatest writers in the world, in Stephen King.
For sure. Well,
But he
like,
still,
speaking of Kubrick, there's a lot in this film that reminds me of Full Metal Jacket, just in terms of like the narration, the way that that's delivered. There are obviously like echoes of Vietnam type stuff in this as well, like imagery and whatnot, you know. Um,
yeah,
and like I would, and you know, I think that like just, I think that Cameron does show some love to that film subtly in this, in the way that it's shot, and the way that it's like in the narration aspect of it.
absolutely, absolutely.
Jake
Also,
Sully's narration sounds a lot like that Full Metal Jacket narration, you know?
yeah, and I like the fact that we got Jake's narration to help with the exposition.
Which is interesting, right? So, like, that's another thing I was thinking about. Because we watched a lot of movies over the last week while my folks were here. And, like, so we watched Thor Love and Thunder,
Hmm.
we watched Black Adam, and we watched Bullet Train.
How was
And
Bullet Train?
so good. So good.
Okay, because I was planning on watching that today.
We
Actually,
should do that film at some point.
okay, want to do
It's
that next
very
week?
good. Well, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
So
I'm such a
of
big
these,
kid.
of these three films,
Yes.
Black Adam gave us the most traditional type of exposition dump, right? Where
Hmm.
a good 15 minutes at the beginning and another good like 10 to 15 minutes in the middle were spent just telling us what happened. And then
Right.
also what happened again from a more honest perspective.
Right.
And like,
Which is kind of cool. There's two different stories. There's the one guy's perspective, the other guy's perspective, and the truth.
right. But that to me, like there was so much just telling me what was happening, right?
Hmm.
And then Avatar and Love and Thunder and Bullet Train just threw me into this story and let me figure it out on my own, right? And
Hmm.
with some little help here and there, right? Because you get Korg's like you know, here's the story of Thor, the space Viking, right? You get those little things, but like super snappy, right? Recaps.
Yeah. And
Then
who doesn't love Korg?
right, and here you get Jake Sully talking, doing his like video logs, but none of it is like over. None of it makes me feel like the writers of the movie thought I was an idiot.
Right. Well, I think with filmmaking, and we've talked about this, filmmaking with exposition dumps are, it's like they're trying to be novels. You
Yeah.
cannot do narration in a film the way
To
you would in a
me, it
book.
felt like Black Adam was trying to skip the origin story.
It really wanted to.
Like it wanted like that whole first 15-minute exposition should have been a movie.
I agree. But
And
we had to get to Dwayne Johnson Black Adaming. We
yeah,
had to get there.
had to get there.
I'll tell you what do you think real quick?
Spoiler alert,
Since
not good.
you know what? It's big and explosive. It's a lot of bang.
It's kind of boring though.
It's you know what? If The Rock wasn't in this movie, I would not have watched it.
And they
Like,
didn't even let The Rock do what we love The Rock to do, which is be himself, right? Like he didn't get
he
to
was a very
quit or
stoic
be,
version of himself.
this dude, they could have just like, well, and I guess they did CGI him in most of the time, but like he could have just been a cartoon and it would have been the same.
I kind of wish that we could have gotten a Luke, why couldn't we have Luke Hobbs as Black Adam? I wanted a Luke Hobbs style. Like, actually, you know what? I think this is why James Gunn has been brought in
Yeah, thank God.
to do all this, and everyone's all getting pissed off and blah blah blah. It's like, well, look, man,
Y'all
You're
done
not.
y'all done had 10 years to fix this thing.
You've had a long time to fix it. You've ruined it. You've let everyone do whatever the hell they want. Let a guy who has worked that knows how to do this do it. Now, granted, it sucks we're not going to get Guardians of the Galaxy anymore, especially after this holiday special. I want more,
It was
but at the
very
same,
good, by the way.
it was very good. The holiday special was so good. I was in tears. But you know what? I'm excited because if DC is really good, Marvel is going to have to improve.
Yeah.
Marvel's going to have to step up its game if DC gets good. So I think that in the next 10 years, we're going to get some really, really good superhero films. And they're actually going to stop, and hopefully they can stop all being the same paint by numbers.
Yeah.
But I digress.
Yeah.
But the whole point, to take it back, and I think you're absolutely right, is that Jake's narration as part of his video logs do an amazing job with
that's
not
a smart way to do exposition.
Yeah, because it gives us Jake's history. It gives us the company's history on this planet and how his influence and how the company's greed is forcing all of these things in motion. They're showing us while lightly telling us, and we are Jake. We're learning a lot of this stuff with Jake.
Well, yeah, and that's I think the smart thing about like having him be our POV character, right? Because we get sort of the like day one, all of these guys showing up on Pandora, like overview, right? Like welcome to Pandora, la 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 la, blah blah
You're gonna
blah.
die here,
right? Yeah, is that like all that stuff is cool, right? Like we get like introduced pretty quickly to like how things are gonna be, but yeah, because we get to see it through his eyes, we get to see it for the first time, and that I think is cool.
Can we
I
give
have
some
long
love?
been an Avatar apologist, right?
Yeah,
And
I remember we because we talked about Avatar before,
yeah,
and we sort of came the conversation kind of was along the same lines, but I was very, very staunch in my beliefs on the film.
it is imperfect for sure,
It
but
feels very long at times.
it does feel long at times, and a lot of that is world building stuff, right? Which could have been a little bit faster.
Yeah,
But because there are like really about 2 hours of this movie where nothing happens.
no,
and it's just like, ooh, look at the lights, or like look at the cool stuff, and it is all very cool, honestly.
Yeah.
But and so I have a little bit more patience for it, and me, I'm like all for like a tight 90.
I'm a big fan of a tight 90, but I understand.
Yeah, but I mean, could this film have been? Could it have been 2 hours? Could have been 2:15? Could it have been the same length and made better use of its time? Sure.
Yes.
Because when we get to the final act, I feel like we have like done very little to establish, like we've established like unobtainium and all of that stuff, but the amount of time that we've spent establishing Navi culture is like disproportionate to the amount of time that we've spent like establishing the bad guys. You know what I mean?
Right.
And just a little bit more would have been fine. But regardless,
I would have liked to have learned a bit more about Colonel Cordich's his why.
Yeah.
I would have loved, because I mean, and Stephen Lang as Miles Cordic is such a great character.
I believe that his why is because he doesn't know anything else. Like this is what he knows. Like
all he knows is conquer.
Right. All he knows is conquer.
Okay. I really
he's a diesel. So this is one of the things that you'll love this in Bullet Train.
Okay.
One of the assassins, he's like, everything that I need to know about people, I learned from Thomas the Tank Engine.
Oh my God.
He's like, every one of the engines on Thomas the Tank Engine is a different type of person, right? And he's like, and you're a diesel. And Diesel is like, this guy is one of the engines that just like plows through everything. He's just a bad guy. He wants nothing more than, he's strong-headed, he's stubborn, he's like all of that, right? Like that guy is a total diesel.
Yeah, he is. And I'll tell you what, man, this dude is a badass. Like he's up in there. I'm trying to count how much he's got on that bar.
Yeah.
When he's doing that bench press like it's nothing. Then he's like, low gravity will make you soft. I'm like, dude, low gravity is like make you stronger, right? Because you've got to walk harder to move.
Yeah, but everything is lighter.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, all right, you got me there. You know what? I got my gravity because I always
Your
thought
gravity's
something.
backwards.
Yeah, because I always thought like higher gravity meant things were lighter.
Yeah, so like
Because
the moon is low gravity, right?
gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay. Oh, okay. So then you got to have weights on you so you don't go flying away. See,
right.
why didn't I go to the Armageddon School of Understanding gravity?
I don't know. I don't know.
But
So my
but
my
no,
final thoughts here is that Avatar is an imperfect but beautiful film that has a more complex story than you might think just by looking at the surface.
I can agree with that. I also kind of feel like a lot of us in today's culture really want to find a lot of contention and throw buzzwords at things.
I think that a lot of people that quote unquote hate this movie are just sort of regurgitating things they've heard other people say. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and not only that, it reminds me a lot when I was watching this time, I was worried because, as you know, as I've said, I've been an apologist for this film since I saw it and since a lot of people didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, when I was watching, because I haven't revisited it, it's not something that I've watched. That I don't love Avatar. I'm not like going to watch it like every year or anything like that, you know. So when I
Yeah.
went to watch it this time, I thought, will I have a different experience? Will I find that they were right? You know, and in some ways, sure, like it didn't hold up in exactly the same ways that I thought it might, but in other ways, it might have been better. But ultimately, I was reminded of how you and I both felt when we watched the Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Mm-hmm.
That people tend to latch on to one or two little issues with the story
And
and
run with it.
and the rest of the movie. When in reality, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, we both had a good time watching that movie.
It was a great time.
And
I'm actually upset that we're not going to get Mutt Williams in the new one.
I know, and here we are again with like because it's become popular to hate James Cameron, and because
Mm-hmm.
for some reason we've culturally decided that it's become popular to hate Avatar, doesn't mean that
Mm-hmm.
you shouldn't give this movie a shot or a second shot because
I
like
agree.
there are a lot of things to like about it.
And can I say one thing as well? Listen, I understand why we're not big fans of the idea of the white savior complex. I get it. At the same token, can we please celebrate when we see a white male embrace something that's not white maleism?
Yeah, right.
Can
Like,
we celebrate that?
can we celebrate like allyship because
Yes.
he allied himself with the right people?
Right. This guy could have seriously been like, I'm a white guy. This is another white guy. This he says he's going to give me my legs if I screw over these people that aren't us. He could have been like, fuck these
Well,
guys.
and aside from the one scene that made him look very Messiah-like, he did fight alongside them.
The whole and did everything he could to learn from them
Yeah,
and took their and did everything he could to learn more from
and
them.
took his own initiative to learn that stuff.
Exactly. He did everything that he possibly could.
He never looked at Neytiri and was like, "Could you explain colonization from your perspective for me, please?" Like
No.
he learned that from from his own experiential research, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think that this movie is really easy to hate if you stop at the surface.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's a little bit more going on here than we give it credit for.
There's a lot more going on with this movie, and I think that film, especially film and music, but especially film and television, do a lot to show you where society is at with how they look at how society talks about it. And I'm sorry, you can't say in one breath, we need allyship. But then when you see a concept of allyship, shit on it.
Yeah.
You can't have your cake and eat it too. You cannot be mad about a thing, but then when you see something that you're asking for of it, still be mad at it and shit at it and call it what it's not. And you're absolutely, and the thing is, if you want to dislike the fact that it looked like this Messiah-like moment when the waters parted because he was walking up, all right, why do you have to cling to the one thing that was done from a narrative perspective? It wasn't
It
done
was
to
established early on that this was the way this was going to be, right? Like they had established this thing as like the untamable beast, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then Jake Sully tamed it. Like, of course, everybody would be in awe of that. Like they're in
Right.
awe of like I feel like they're in awe of his like commitment.
And his skill. And it's
Yeah.
like, how is this guy, how is this person, this human that is in a false body, how was he able to accomplish this? That's what it was. It's more like, that's just like, look, man, if there's a stray dog in your town that is like the most untrainable dog no one can get to, and then you see some dude show up with that dog on a leash listening to his commands, you're going to be in awe.
Mm-hmm.
Or if there's a stallion that cannot be broken, and then a month later you see a guy riding on that exact same stallion with a saddle and a bridle in its mouth, not a britta, but a brittle, you're going to be in awe. How did you do that?
Well, that's the thing is like you and I would be in awe, but like there are a bunch of butthurt dudes out here that would feel attacked.
That's true.
Right.
That's
And
true.
those are the people that don't like Avatar. So stop being a butthurt dude and like learn to enjoy the beautiful, soft things in life. Right. Like it's okay if it's pretty. It doesn't have to be gray.
Right. And we fully admit that this is a film that does have its faults.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm not going to say that this is a perfect film at all.
Not even close. Not even close.
This is what I appreciate about James Cameron. This is what I appreciate about M. Night Shyamalan and a lot of these other guys. Is like they aren't afraid to take a swing.
Right. M. Night Shyamalan has,
you know, they don't always connect, but they will always take a big swing.
And you got to appreciate that.
And you have to appreciate it because like you can't in one breath complain about how all movies are the same and then like shit on the people that take big swings, right?
Right. That's just like, that's like in football. We're so big for those that watch football. I know you don't really. We had this discussion off here. But like you can't sit there and like call a quarterback garbage because he throws an interception because he took a risk downfield. But then at the same token, oh, he's the greatest quarterback ever because he took another risk down the field and it paid off.
Right.
People are going to take risks. Was Avatar: The Last Airbender the one that M. Night Shyamalan was involved in? Was it terrible? Absolutely. But you know what? Hey, he tried.
Yeah, he did. And not many other people have tried. And he also did Unbreakable and The Sixth Sense. And these are great films. And like, of course, like a lot of his other movies, I would love to do an M. Night Shyamalan block where we take his movies that I am an apologist for and I try to get you to come around on them. Because I think like, I just think that he's like really an interesting filmmaker and an interesting storyteller, much like I think like Cameron, I think, takes fewer narrative risks and more like big sort of like production type risks.
Right.
Like it's a difference to like when James Cameron spends several million more dollars than someone else would to make the same movie just to make it look a certain way. Like that's a different kind of risk, but it's still a risk worth celebrating, right? Because what Cameron is like, where Shyamalan is interested in narrative, Cameron is interested in cinematic experience, right? And there's something to be said for that. Like the movies should feel like a magical place.
Yes, he's trying to pull us into his mind so we can see what this looks like from his eyes. And I mean, you and I as writers, we can appreciate that because how that's why we write what we write and how we write, so that we can share what's inside with everyone else. So I mean, honestly, I think James Cameron is done after the last Avatar movie is done. I think this is when because the last Avatar movie, the fourth one, is supposed to come out in 2026. So he's filming these movies back to back to back, Lord of the Rings style, like we already said. I seriously think that after this is when he steps away from directing. in writing.
Yeah.
That's what I think, because this is a lot, an awful lot.
Yeah. Well, let's get. Let's wrap
Yeah,
this up.
yeah. Well, this is
I
the
mean,
longest we've gone in
what
a
it
long
was made on a shit ton of money budget, and it made a shit ton more.
Yep,
And
just under $3 billion in the box office currently, $237 million budget at the time. One of the most expensive films ever made
yeah,
until I guess the new
7.9
one.
on IMDb. I'm looking at the Rotten Tomatoes, 82%, which is probably about right.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, like I said, it's up there.
Audience score. How often do you see that?
That is really on par. That is a rarity. I like to call those unicorns.
Yeah. So 82% tomato meter based on 334 reviews, 82% audience score based on 250 plus thousand or 250,000 plus. And so there you have it. We'll be back momentarily. Here is Bartender Smiley with an explanation of, whatever
Stuff, what we do and things. Yeah. Crap.
The Plotaholics rating system for the movies is a pretty simple system. Basically, they rate movies based on how many shots it takes to get through them. So if you got a good movie and you get through it all the way sober, then it takes 0 shots to get through the movie. And then if you got a really bad movie, then it could take up to 5 shots to get through the whole thing. I think you can try to figure out the middle part yourself. So what can I get you?
I mean, I'm gonna. It is tough because for me, it's like somewhere between a 1 and a 2 shot.
Yeah.
But it's not quite a 2, but it's also not quite a 1. You
Are
know what
you
I mean?
giving this a 1.5?
I might give it. We've done this before. I'll give it a 1 shot and a beer chaser.
Oh, so you're making a Boilermaker. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to give this a 2. Just because there are times where the drag in this film is a little bit too much for me at times. This is my first time revisiting this film in many years. I'm talking at least 5, maybe more. I would probably was gonna dust the old Blu-ray out before going to the theater to see the new one. Anywho,
Yeah.
but other than that, I would not have done so. So I mean, I'm comfortable with giving it a 2 shot of a Fireball.
Yeah.
And but I mean, and we've said it.
A 1 shot of a real liquor. So.
Oh Jesus. But no, I mean, and it's not to say it's not so much impugning the entire film. It's the parts when this movie drags just drag a little too much.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of instances, there's a lot of issues with this film that I have that we didn't get a chance to get to. We talked about the primary thing. Some of the dialogue just doesn't fit for me. A lot of some of the stuff just doesn't work for me. It is what it is. Is it enjoyable? It absolutely is. If you're one of the people that have never seen this movie and you're trash talking it, stop it and watch it for yourself. And like I already said, man, look at Jake as an ally, not as a white savior. And can we please stop putting white savior on every single thing? Can we please stop that? Because it gets old. It gets really old after a while. If things are what they are, absolutely. But let's look at it a little bit deeper, a little bit closer before we just start throwing that term out.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have no idea what we're going to do next week. We haven't talked about it. So we're going to talk about that after we go off, and then you'll find out whenever you fucking find out, you low-life pieces of shit.
Wow.
No more about what we're going to do so that you can write us and tell us. But don't ask for favors. Don't ask us to review your movie.
Yeah, dude. We're not going to review your film, pal.
Right. Also, just write us and tell us what we're going to do. Right. I would love to know. But anyway, make sure you subscribe, etc., etc. We hope you had a lovely holiday season if you celebrate. If not, I hope you had a nice week. And otherwise, we will be back next week. Happy New Year, also.
Happy New Year
And,
to you.
Yeah, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.
Take a trip with us to Nilbog. Just promise not to drink the goo.
Oh my God!
If you get sucked into the Matrix, we will send the phone for you.
Do you believe in fate?
But every movie has a plot hole, and every hole gets filled somehow. Whiskey, wine, or blue milk. Just don't cut me off right now. We're the Plotaholics, a breakfast club of two. We're the Plotaholics, ripping plots apart for you.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.